Council Public Works Procurement and Contracting Committee will be called to order. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Toomer.
Here.
Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller is absent at the moment. Ms. Conwell. Conwell is absent at the moment. Mr. Shrine.
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. There is a quorum.
Okay. Is there any public comment, Madam Clerk, related to the agenda this morning?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed
Okay,
in.
thank you. And could I have approval of minutes from the August 1st, 2017 meeting, please?
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And we'll move on to matters referred to committee. Madam Clerk?
Resolution number 2017-0157, declaring that public convenience and welfare requires roadway and traffic signal improvements along Warrensville Center Road, Emory Road, Richmond Road, Northfield Road, and Miles Road in the village of North Randall and city of Warrensville Heights.
Okay, thank you. And who do we have speaking before the committee this morning?
Sorry, Nicole English from Public Works.
Okay, Nicole. If you could just give us a brief explanation as to this legislation here.
So this is the first step in our process. It's welfare and convenience. And this is for a project related to, you may have seen it in the news, the Amazon project that is out in North Randall and Warrensville Heights. Mm-hmm. We've worked with GCP on collaboration on this project, and the county is, through Road and Bridge funds, is willing to commit $300,000 of the $1.5 million. The village of North Randall is assembling the rest of the funding, which a good amount is coming through grants through the state Jobs and Commerce and 629 funds. And we're also submitting requests in order to run the project. So the village would hire the designer, they would come up with the plans, and then the county would sell the construction project and run the construction project. It's various intersections. There was a map, I think, included in your packet that sort of shows. It's kind of hard to describe in words, but it's mostly signal improvements, some lane adjustments, and it would be constructed in 2018 before the opening.
Okay. Any questions from my colleagues on this?
Yeah, just, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This is all they're going to require of infrastructure for a project of this nature? Boy, that's pretty minimal.
Yeah, they had performed, the developer was working with ODOT and the village before we got involved, and they've done traffic studies, and this is what has come out as the needs. You know, was built for a mall at one point in time, so the hope is there is some capacity out there existing, but this was approved through the village and ODOT as to the improvements needed.
Yeah, but a mall and a warehouse of this nature, bringing in the semis and all the stuff off of that, I'm very familiar with that, those intersections, and that is, I will be shocked if that's if we don't have congestion at those intersections as a result of it. But
and
have we done our own individual study in regards to this ourselves, as opposed to relying on the village?
No, I mean, we've reviewed the traffic study, and I mean, it seems appropriate, you know, again, for us to do a separate study. And we're not responsible for the roads in the village because, again, it's municipality, so they're responsible for their roads. So we couldn't really tell them they needed to make more improvements. They would have to do that. ODOT is looking at the interstate impacts, and they have given us some suggestions, so those are getting incorporated. So they've also reviewed the impact on the interstate.
Yeah, because it just strikes me as we're looking at probably, it seems like we're going to exponentially multiply the number of rigs and trucks that are going to be going in there. A mall is one thing, but these guys are going to be bringing in pallets and pallets and pallets of big stuff. Less employees, but a lot more stuff.
Right. Can I introduce Vince from
Sure.
GCP?
Hi. Thank you, Nicole. Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you very much for considering this. Mr. Shrine, you raised an excellent question, and I think that points out what a great win-win solution this is for our region. This project didn't go out in a greenfield somewhere where we need to create new roads, need to create new interchanges, new sewer, et cetera. This is in a spot that's already well built out. The roads are of sufficient quality and quantity in general to support this project. The company hired its own engineering firm. It's Langen Engineering downtown here, so they hired some local folks, which is great. Spent a lot of time and money looking at all the questions that you raised, and they've come up with answers, and the answer is all they need is approximately, and this is on the public side, there's some more sort of interior private property improvements. But on the public side, all they are requiring or requesting is about $1.5 million in public improvements, mainly to intersections, new striping, widen this lane, that kind of thing. So it's relatively minor. It's really part of the beauty of this project.
Yeah, well, I'm familiar, there's some exits off of 422 that come into play in there, and then you can hop onto 271 with a little bit of
Right,
chicanery as far as the roads not being chicane, meaning road construction, not out there. So, okay, well, all right. I hope for the best, and I hope we get the big enchilada. This is a nice first step.
We're all hoping and
Yeah.
working on it.
Thanks.
Thank you. And could I, Vince's last name for the record?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Adamus, Adamus.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thanks very
Adonis.
much.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Mr. Miller?
Yes. What is the projected time schedule on this project?
So we're getting ready to start design right now, and we would hope for construction early 2018 to be completed by early to midsummer so that they could be ready and open it by August.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. Any further questions? And I see you want this under suspension of the rules?
That's what we'd prefer so we could get working. They need to get the agreement with the city down to the state for the grants and everything, so.
Okay. If there are no further questions, could I have a
So move
motion for
for second reading.
second reading suspension? All those in favor?
Aye.
We need, get a second.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second for second reading suspension. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the ayes have it. Okay, thank you. Next ordinance, Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2017-0158, making an award on requisition number 40256 to Fabrizi Recycling, the amount not to exceed $3,164,600 for the 2017 sewer repair program.
Okay, and if you could, an explanation of this resolution?
Nicole English again from Public Works. This is our award. We do this traditionally about every 18 months for repair contract for our sewers. And this is to the cities that we have agreements with. And these are for bigger repairs than we can handle with our internal staff. And there was 4 bids pulled and 2 submitted. This was the low bidder. And the contract would be through October of 19.
I'm sorry, through October of 19? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions on this particular piece of legislation, Ms. Baker?
Thank you. How does this interact with the increases of trying to repair our overall sewers for overflow and care of the lake? Does this have the Northeast Ohio sewer, nothing?
No, this is for the cities that we have agreements with. So it's the work that we do with our staff that is bigger and beyond the equipment that we have,
Right.
we would call into this contract. So it's just what we do in the cities, not necessarily the regional sewer district work.
Does it ever, if I may, do you ever complement each other or perhaps do double the work or anything like that? I know it was a huge increase and just wondered how this complements that.
Good morning, council members. Michael Dever, Department of Public Works. As Nicole had mentioned, this is really our responsibility for the communities we take care of their sewers. There's 41 of them. So, and her note about, these are the sewers that are we can dig up to about 15 feet deep. And anything that's in excess of that 15 feet, that's typically, we just don't have the equipment for it. We're looking to possibly go to a 21-foot, but that changes our equipment model, so we haven't done that as of yet. But we are looking into that. But these are the local sewers. Regional sewers are primarily the main interceptors.
Okay.
And but we are always working in tandem with them on any issues, anything. Whenever we tie into their infrastructure.
Right.
So we have an excellent communication with that department. So I can't point out anything specifically. Actually, I can. Ridge Road, there was an interceptor on Ridge Road that was just north of Memphis Avenue. That recently was under the guise of the city of Brooklyn. That was their responsibility. We identified this as a regional sewer, and then the regional sewer district in turn has now taken over the responsibility of that sewer.
Okay.
But there was a repair that we did at first, but just recently now that sewer has been turned over to regional. So we're working together because all of it does flow into each other.
It does, right.
So,
Thank you, I appreciate that.
sure, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Baker. Any further questions? Okay, anything else, Ms. English, on this? Okay, and again, the request is for second reading suspension. Okay, could I have a motion for second reading suspension?
I so move.
And a second, please?
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second for second reading suspension. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And the next ordinance, Madam Clerk, or resolution, Madam Clerk, I'm used to municipal law here.
Resolution number 2017-0159, authorizing the First Amendment to a memorandum of agreement with Village of Woodmere for construction, operation, and maintenance of sanitary sewerage systems located in County Sewer District Number 21.
Okay, and Ms. English, on this particular resolution, what do we have here?
So this is an amendment to an agreement that was originally passed in 1995. Woodmere is now adding storm sewer and water transmission line fees. So it was just sanitary sewers. Now we're going to collect for them on storm sewer and water lines. So this is anticipated to collect about $100,000 more a year that would be directed through the village.
Okay, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? 100,000, is that what it was?
Correct, annually.
Annually collected through the village? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, any questions on this resolution?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Miller and then Mr. Strawn.
Is there any need for suspension on this item?
No, I think this can go 3 readings.
Okay. Mr. Strawn? I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, anything further? Okay, Mr. Strawn?
Yeah, so this is this for like the groundwater surface material that's coming off of like parking lots and roof systems and things of that nature? Because that's got a very big commercial district over in that area. Is that who's picking up
Well,
the bulk of this, or is this the homeowners picking up this $100,000?
Well, this is ultimately, it's coming through their, we have front footage fees within their community. So this is, the intent is that this will be, I think it's a break actually from the front footage fees. So we currently, what are we pulling in from the community? $2.25 per front footage. I'm sorry. Yeah, so we're just redirecting some of those dollars that are already coming into there so they can create a storm account. We have 22 communities that we have full service agreements with, and so this is just enhancing their agreement so that we can take care of their storm lines. And then the water is really a component. The water item is a component to add. If we ever encounter any water work on when we're doing sewer work, they have a fund available to do that repair of water work. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Sharon.
Will not result in an increased cost to the commercial properties that are there? Because I know it's a big concern with hard surface materials that they're now making it difficult, and you keep passing along $100,000 bills because that's not a very big, Woodmere's not a very big.
So that's two different fees now. So the sewer district's fee where they're collecting for the stormwater.
Right.
So that's independent of this. This is an additional fee though on the front footage tax, so additional 50 cents. So I'm staying corrected. So it was originally $1.75 through the request of the village. This is working with the village that they're requesting that we increase this by 50 cents, where 40 cents of it will go into the storm account and 10 cents will go into a water account.
Okay. Well, we just need to be cognizant of the fact that every time we drive up the cost for the commercial properties there, that it makes it, you see the properties going through cycles there. And as you drive down that street, you see businesses coming and going. And it's not it's one of those ones that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes as far as water fees and stormwater fees and things like that.
Right, so this gives us the opportunity now to, when we are working, if we're working on the sanitary lines, it's typically they work hand in hand. Sanitary and storm systems are right next to each other. And if one isn't working properly, then it ends up ultimately that water will migrate into the other system. So this gives you a funding mechanism now to work on both of them. So this is for the improvements, or actually, should I just say the maintenance of the storm system, and then you'd have that separate water component. So I look at it as a plus for the community to know that you've got a standalone fund that's able to maintain each of those systems.
So those are two separate systems, unlike Cleveland where.
That's right. So Cleveland and the inner ring, there is some combined system.
Right.
But as soon as,
Cleveland's combined, isn't it?
that's right. Well, I'm not sure about all of Cleveland is combined, but as you go towards the outer ring, obviously, those are newer systems, so they knew to separate them and
Okay,
for maintenance purposes.
thank you.
Thanks.
Real quickly, who was handling the storm sewer prior to this agreement? The village itself?
Yes, I believe it was, and I'm sorry I don't have that information in front of me right now, but we did have an agreement with the village for sanitary
Sanitary,
services. Yeah, so it was dating back to 95.
Okay. It just seems a long time from 95
Yeah.
to now to just enter into an agreement to, if they've had prior issues, I don't know.
That's right. The village was doing it on their own at the time. And that's the same, our district has, obviously, it's grown substantially since 2008 when the city of Parma came on. And we've added, I think it's 15 additional communities since that time, because it's just it's a very high cost for any of these communities just to purchase the equipment to do this type of work. And that's why there's value looking at the county to provide this regional approach.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, could I have a motion for first reading on this? Or second reading?
I'll move. So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for second reading. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. And if we could have the next resolution read, please.
Resolution number 2017-0160, authorizing an amendment to agreement number AG 1700012 with Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District for disposal of wastewater sewer grid for the period 6/1/2016 through 5/31/2018.
Okay, and if we could have an explanation as to this resolution?
Sure, Mike Chambers with Public Works. We're asking for an increase of $800,000 for disposal of grit, which comes out of the sewers. The reason for this is a couple of reasons. One is we've entered into an agreement with Berea. We're taking on them for some direct bill. Secondly, just as you noticed in this last item, a lot of our communities are getting more into the storm component. We've been shifting a lot of our work into storm. As we do that storm work, there's a lot more grit that's got to come out, and that's contaminated. It's got oils and grease and stuff. We just can't take it to a normal dump. Thus, we have to take it and we work with regional. Regional is probably the only area we can do it. We're doing it at cost. They're passing it on to us at their cost. The only other opportunity would be to go down to Akron, maybe one of their wastewaters, which wouldn't make sense driving all the way down there with our grit. We're probably taking 3 loads a day, 3 to 4 loads a day we're taking to them to handle this. And therefore, because of the need, the additional storm work we're doing, the additional communities we're taking on, we need this extra money. It's a not to exceed, so if we don't spend it, we don't use it, we're not on the hook for it.
Okay. And this is, I think, what I learned in Stormwater University, right? This is where they break that stuff up and send it through processing and all that, the grit.
They do. They process it through their resources. One of the things we're hoping, if we move into a new location, we might be able to build some large drying pads ourselves, maybe cut down on it. We still would have to take the remnants to a landfill, a special landfill. But right now, regional is really our only option for that.
Okay. Any questions on this? Mr. Miller?
Yes. Is this something that we ultimately pay for, or do the various communities that we work with pay for it?
Yeah, everything with sanitary is passed down to the communities. So eventually the communities bear the cost of this. And, based on the work that we do in there, if it's this storm work, then, those communities impacted by it will eventually pay for it. It's in the hourly rate.
Yes.
And is there a need for suspension, or are we good on 3 readings on this?
I think we would prefer the suspension because we're running really low on the account and we just want to make sure that we want to be able to pay regional on time. If it's at all possible, we prefer that, but I think we could wait if we had to.
I have no objection to moving it forward on suspension if my colleagues do not. Okay, so could I have a motion for suspension, second reading?
I'll make a motion for a second reading suspension on 0160.
And could I have a second? We have a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second for second reading suspension on R 2017-0160. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And then, this, Madam Clerk, the final resolution here.
Ordinance number 2017-0004, amending section 501.15 of the county code to modify the requirements of contractors.
Okay, and if you could state your name for the record, please.
Lenora Lockett, Fiscal Office of Procurement and Diversity. The item before you are recommended changes to the indicated section of the county code. This is the section that details the certifications that are required for all contractors.
Okay.
Historically, the intent was that this was mainly related to public improvement contractors. As such, non-public improvement contractors were having difficulty agreeing or certifying to all the detailed certifications that were required. Instead of granting a waiver repeatedly in those instances, it was recommended that the county code be changed to make sure that it is clearly states which vendors are applicable for which items.
Okay. Any questions for my colleagues on this?
Yes, could you go through the items one by one that are being changed and just explain why that particular item is being changed and what the problem was with it?
I would have to defer to the law department on that item specifically to go through itemize what the items are.
Good morning, Sarah Kamak with the Department of Law. As Lenora explained, these changes are really intended to limit the certifications for specific types of contracts where they would be most applicable and to kind of mirror the initial intent of this section. If you look at section 5, the first change to do you just want me to go through all of the red line?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. If you look at section 501.15A, you'll see that we struck the, firstly, we changed the name of the section, the title of the section, to just be requirements of contractors rather than required certifications by contractors. And you'll see that the first change in 501.15A was to delete the words shall certify that and have it just read shall. The reason for that was suggested by the law department because rather than having contractors make a certification on a particular date that then could change as time went through the contract, we thought it made more sense to have them just be required to always be in compliance with these requirements. And please just stop me if you have questions, or I'll just kind of keep running through. Under 501.15A1, we limited this to the requirement for compliance with Ohio's drug-free workplace requirements to public improvement contracts as provided in Ohio Revised Code Section 15303. We got regular questions on this certification because there isn't a specific Ohio drug-free workplace requirement other than in this particular section of the Ohio Revised Code, which relates only to public improvement contracts. So when it was applicable to all of our contractors, we had several contractors coming to us and saying, we don't drug test every single one of our employees, and other requirements like referring them to counseling and different things that are required under that section of the Ohio Revised Code. A lot of our contractors don't do, but those things are required when you're dealing with a public improvements contract. So that's why we limited that to those particular types of contracts.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Baker.
Does that make it then more difficult if they're not in the practice of having every single worker go through a drug test? How are we making it more difficult for them to comply?
We are not. We actually, and this is true with all of these changes, it doesn't change the requirements of our vendors. It just changes which vendors they apply to. So for public improvement contractors, this requirement already existed and it exists in the Ohio Revised Code. Mm-hmm. We're just saying that for other types of contractors, it's no longer going to be applicable, if that makes sense.
Mr. Schron?
Yes, but as a vendor myself for government contracts at the national level, you've just, by taking that out, made it more difficult for them to be consistent in that. And you give them a crutch, realistically, by having that provision in there. I believe, it seems to me that if they could point to language that says we're going to be a drug-free, if we want to apply for this, we're going to be a drug-free business, it makes it easier for them to say, everybody here is going to get drug tested, all new employees. And so, because we want to at least be eligible to apply for these kind of contracts out there. So by taking that out, those firms now don't have that, I guess, that ability to say that the government is, I'm not opposing this by myself, and it's going to get more and more of an issue as we've gone to a state authorizing marijuana to police. So everything I'm reading says that by making the drug testing a government requirement for contracting, it makes it better for the employer in all respects, because now the employer is the one that's stuck in the middle of having to make all these decisions from here on out. So I throw that out there as a cautionary thing that you might not want to take it out.
Sure, and we're open to, I mean, comments from council and changes. We prepared this in conjunction with council staff. So anything can be changed or revised, and if you don't want that limited to public improvements contracts, that's okay. The issue for us was that we had many vendors who said that they couldn't comply with it and that they didn't intend to start drug testing all of their employees.
So just as an aside, so as a result of that, then they were seeking waivers? Is that what they were doing then? You guys were going through the process of having waivers? Is that?
Well, in this particular, for this particular instance, for the Ohio Drug-Free Workplace, I believe what they wound up doing was they would make the certification with the understanding that the workplace requirements we were referring to related to public improvement contracts, so they didn't apply to them. Mm-hmm. So then they would say, yes, we can certify that we're in compliance because it doesn't apply. This just confirms for them that it doesn't apply. But I mean, we can always change it if we don't, if that's not what council would prefer it say.
Where was your business input to make that change? From the few that don't comply, or from people like GCP? We just had them testify on another issue. Where were we getting the guidance to take that language out?
We just had many contractors who had raised questions about it, who didn't understand which requirements they were being, required to comply with, and saying that certain ones didn't. And this particular section wasn't the impetus for these code changes. It was another section, which it's actually the next section. But
what kind of contracting were these contracts for? What type of services were we getting?
All different. Many IT contractors, would come back to us and say, we don't drug test all of our employees, and we don't.
What other kind of contracts? What other kind of contracts are we looking for solicitations on? What other services and products are we?
I'm not sure I understand your
You mean
question.
outside of public? Public improvement?
Outside of public. What other things were we buying that this is now going to be a waiver or going to be taken out of the language?
Well, like IT contracting, for instance. We have a lot of software vendors that don't drug test all of their employees. And they were raising questions about whether this applied to them.
Okay, so the potential of employees that are under the influence of drugs while they're working on an IT project on behalf of the county. And I know that at 1 o'clock, we're going to be discussing a significant IT project in the ERP package. It would scare the heck out of me if we've got firms that are not being conscientious about their workforce as far as whether they're under the influence of drugs doing work on our IT support for county projects.
Yeah, I mean, it's open to discussion among council. These are recommended changes. If council feels like it's appropriate to not change this particular section, that is
Well, all I'm asking is where do we get guidance? Do we got complaints from the people who want to apply so they can, I mean, in today's environment, it just seems like it's, for any firm that's doing significant contracting, that this is just part of the cost of doing business today. And I can only assume that, one, it's a cost driver. Hey, we're not going to test our people because it's about $150 per employee to do that. And you have a lot of rejections if you have that, but that's okay. It seems to me if you're going to get a qualified workforce working on, I mean, I know Mr. Miller's conversation is going to be at 1 o'clock, are going to be on a $25 million ERP package program. It would bother me quite a bit if we had people that are under the influence that are doing programming for our billion-dollar county funds out there. Thank you.
Okay. With that, if you want to proceed with.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. If we want to proceed with where we left off with the explanation.
Sure. Under 50115A2, this is a limitation to limit this requirement for an experience modification rating to be lower than 1.5 to public improvement contracts. This actually was the section that was the impetus for making these changes. We, over the past several months, have had several different types of vendors come to us and say that they were unable to make this certification, that they had an experience modification rating that was in excess of 1.5. The reason is if you have, for whatever reason, an increased number of workers' comp claims that you might have, and we had vendors from Planned Parenthood to the hotels where we were hosting, conferences, to we have 2 school districts who are going to be doing our UPK contracts, and the view was that the intention of this certification was that we were not contracting with construction companies that have unsafe practices, not that we're precluding vendors like Planned Parenthood or school districts from contracting with the county. In some instances, we were able to take a group rating, and they would have a group rating that would be under 1.5, or they would know that their rating would be going down soon, but that it wouldn't be down as of the time of contracting. So we felt like it made sense to limit this certification to public improvement contracts.
Okay.
The next change is really just to change the wording. Since we took out the word shall certify, we just fixed the wording so that it makes sense that they just shall be in compliance with equal employment opportunity laws. The next is to limit the prevailing wage requirements to public improvement contracts. Prevailing wage only applies to public improvement contracts anyway, so this was another one that we would get a lot of questions about, and we would have to explain that if it didn't apply to their particular type of company, then it wasn't applicable to them. Actually, that's 4 and 5 are both related to prevailing wage, so
Okay.
That's the limitation there. These next 6, 7, 8, 9, actually, all of the rest of the changes are not a limitation. They're just to change the wording so that it makes sense with taking out the certification requirement, and just to say that they shall continue to be in compliance with these things.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, Mr. Miller?
Based on your presentation, I think the uncertainty relates to the first 2 items. I don't think there's a whole lot of question on the rest of it. And as I understand it, I don't think there's any real rush to make these changes, so I kind of would like to suggest that we hold it over for a meeting and provide some opportunity for some further discussion and consideration, and come back to it.
Okay. I have, Ms. Baker, yeah.
I just have a clarification question before we leave this.
Okay.
On number 2, it has, does not have an experience modification rating. I know what group rating is, but what is an experience modification rating?
It's a specific rating that's issued by the Bureau of Workers' Comp. It's my understanding, and I don't have a ton of background in it, but my understanding is that it is an individual rating that's given to different entities, and they may be involved, they may be in a risk pool where they would get a group rating, but they also have an individual rating that's issued by the Bureau of Workers' Comp, and it changes based on, you know, the number of claims and the type of claims and the size of workers' comp claims that have come through for that company.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
Briefly, let the record reflect that Ms. Conwell has joined us as well. Mr. Schrein?
Yeah, I'm a little have some experience with the experience rating, and it's reflective of potentially it could be a category within your workers' comp categories,
Okay.
and perhaps you have a higher experience of instances with the warehousing, and maybe you have some slips and falls. You know, in my particular
Or higher
business,
risk.
yeah, where you've got experience, you can trace it right back to that individual employer.
Got it.
And it should be noted because the pool should not be impacted by your individual performance of your experience.
Okay, any further questions on this? Okay, at Councilman Miller's suggestion, if there's no rush on this, I think given the questions that the committee has regarding, in particular, the first two sections of this proposed legislation, I would make a motion to hold this and bring it up for further discussion.
You're the chair.
Okay. Well, I will do that. If I could have a second on that, or? Second. Okay. So I have a motion and a second to hold. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and we'll hold this on, and bring this up for further discussion at a later committee, okay? Appreciate your time. Is there anything else, Madam Chair?
Could I just note,
yes.
for the committee, contract is not actually in this committee, but there is a UPK contract that has a waiver of the experience modification requirement related to the universal pre-K. It's 2 of the school districts were unable to meet that requirement. So just so you're aware, you may see that waiver in that, the resolution related to that particular contract when it comes to council or.
Okay,
on
and if you
the
can make sure whoever is
Human
presenting that
Services
brings that to our attention, so we're
Sure.
aware of that when it comes forward. Okay, appreciate that.
Education.
All right, appreciate that. Madam Clerk, is there anything else before the Public Works Committee?
No one is signed
No
in
one
for
signed
public
in?
comment.
Okay, and with that, anything from members? Okay, with that, could I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and Public Works Procurement Contract Committee shall adjourn at 10:40 a.m. Thank you.